second phone was under the passenger seat of my wife's car. I almost left it there. Then the screen lit up. One message said, "Did you tell David about the house?" I read it twice. At that moment, I thought I was about to discover that my wife was cheating on me. I was right. What I didn't know was that the affair was only part of the story. She had already been making plans for our house, our money, and a future that didn't include me. The second phone was under the passenger seat of my wife's car. I almost left it there. Figured it was an old phone she'd forgotten about. Maybe something from work. Then the screen lit up. One message came through. "Did you tell David about the house?" I read it twice. My name was right there. I was standing in my own driveway, holding a phone my wife had apparently been hiding from me. And suddenly, the little things I'd ignored the last year didn't seem so little anymore. My name's David. I'm 61. Karen and I had been married 32 years. We had 2 grown kids, 3 grandkids, a house we'd almost paid off, and the kind of life that probably looked pretty ordinary from the outside. I worked as a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant. Karen worked in administration for a medical company. We weren't rich, weren't struggling either. We had retirement accounts, some savings, and a plan to stay in our house another 10 or 15 years. At least that's what I thought. Karen had been acting different for about a year. She started staying late at work, at first once or twice a week. Then it got to be 3 or 4 nights. I'd ask, "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just busy." I'd nod. That was usually the end of it. She also started keeping her regular phone close, changed the password. She'd take it into the bathroom. If a message came in during dinner, she'd look at it and turn the screen away. One night, I finally said, "You've been pretty distracted lately." She looked at me. "I'm tired, David." "Okay, you worry too much." Maybe I did. I let it go. Looking back, I think part of me already knew something was wrong, just wasn't ready to find out what. There were other things too. She started dressing different for work. Nothing dramatic, just little changes I'd notice, and then talk myself out of noticing. She'd buy a new blouse, get her hair done, leave the house 10 minutes earlier than she needed to. Once, I asked if she was meeting somebody after work. She looked at me a second. "No." "Why?" "Just asking." She shook her head. "You've been watching too many detective shows." I laughed. She laughed too. And that was the end of it. At least, that's what I told myself. The morning I found the second phone, Karen had taken her car to work. Around lunch, she called me. "Can you bring me those papers from the house?" "What papers?" "The ones on my desk. I need them this afternoon." "Okay." She told me where she'd parked the car and said she'd left a folder inside. I found the folder on the passenger seat. When I bent down to pick it up, I saw something underneath the seat. A black phone. I pulled it out. The screen was unlocked. There were several notifications. I wasn't looking for trouble. But then the screen lit up again. "Michael, did you tell David about the house?" I stopped. Michael, I'd heard the name before. A man from Karen's company. She'd mentioned him a few times over the past year. Just a friend. That's what she'd called him. I sat in the driver's seat. Should have put the phone down. Instead, I opened the messages. The first few were exactly what I expected. Dinner, late nights, messages about missing each other, things a husband doesn't want to read about his wife. There were pictures too. Nothing explicit, didn't need to be. A restaurant table, 2 coffee cups, a picture of Michael standing beside a car. One message from Karen said she wished she could leave work early. Michael wrote back he'd see her that night. I kept scrolling. Then the conversation changed. Michael wrote, "You need to tell him before you move the money." Karen answered, "I know. I'm waiting for the right time." I stared at the screen. Move what money? I scrolled back up. There were messages about our house, a realtor's name, a property in another state. Then I saw numbers, retirement accounts, home equity, about $85,000 they figured could be available to help finance a new place. I put the phone down. For a few seconds, I just sat there. I wasn't thinking about Michael anymore. I was thinking about the house where our kids had grown up, the kitchen where we'd had thousands of dinners, the garage where I'd kept my tools 20 years, the house I thought we were gonna grow old in. Then another message came through. "Michael, what if he refuses?" "Karen, he won't. He never does." I read that sentence again. That one hurt more than the others. Not because it meant she was cheating. I already knew that now. It bothered me because she knew me. She knew I avoided fights. She knew I'd spent 32 years trying to keep our home peaceful. And she'd apparently built her plan around that. I kept reading. There were conversations about when she should tell me, questions about whether I'd fight over the house. There was even a message where Michael asked whether she'd talked to a realtor yet. Karen answered, "Not officially." That told me she'd already thought about it. This wasn't an affair that had suddenly gotten out of control. There was a plan. I took pictures of the important messages. Then I put the phone right where I'd found it. I drove home. Karen came home around 6, walked into the kitchen and dropped her purse on the counter. Hey. She opened the refrigerator. "What's for dinner?" I looked at her. "How long have you been planning to leave me?" She stopped. The refrigerator door stayed open. For several seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she slowly closed it. "What are you talking about?" I put my phone on the table. I'd sent the photographs to myself. Her face changed when she saw them. Not much, but enough. "Where'd you get those?" "Your second phone." She sat down. I stayed where I was. Didn't yell, didn't call her names, didn't ask about Michael. I already knew. I asked, "How long?" She looked at the table. "I don't know." "Try." She took a breath. "About 6 months." 6 months planning to leave. She nodded. "The affair?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I sat across from her. "What about the money?" "I wasn't trying to steal from you." "Then what were you doing?" "I was trying to make sure I could start over." I looked at her. "Without me." She looked away. "Yes." That one word was harder than I expected, not because I hadn't known, because now she'd said it, out loud. Karen told me she'd been unhappy for years, said she felt like we'd stopped living and were just maintaining a house and paying bills, said she didn't want to spend the rest of her life feeling like she was waiting for something to change. Maybe some of that was true. I wasn't perfect. I'd worked too much. I'd gotten comfortable. There were years when I'd come home from work, eat dinner, watch television, and go to bed without asking Karen what she wanted out of life. I could admit that, but I couldn't accept that she'd answered that problem by making decisions about our house and our money behind my back. I asked, "Does Michael know all this?" She was quiet. Then she said, "Some of it, How much? I don't know. I almost laughed. That was becoming her answer to everything. I stood up. I need some time. She looked at me. David, I said, I need some time. I walked into the garage, sat in my truck with the door closed, didn't start it, just sat there. 32 years. And somehow I was sitting in my own garage, trying to figure out whether the woman I'd married was still the person I thought she was. I didn't confront Michael, didn't call the realtor, didn't empty our accounts, didn't send Karen's messages to our kids. Next morning, I called an attorney. Then I started gathering documents, bank statements, retirement records, mortgage papers, tax returns, insurance information, anything that showed what we owned and how it was held. First time in 32 years, I stopped assuming that because something belonged to both of us, we were both making decisions about it. A few days later, I checked the accounts again. No money had moved. That mattered, gave me time. The divorce wasn't pleasant. There were meetings, paperwork, arguments about the house, arguments about retirement. Karen insisted she wasn't trying to take what wasn't hers. Said she'd only been trying to make sure she wasn't left with nothing. I told her I understood wanting security, didn't understand making plans with our money while pretending everything was normal at home. She didn't have much to say to that. Eventually, the house was sold. The retirement accounts got divided as part of the settlement. The money Karen had been planning around didn't simply become hers, because she'd already decided what she wanted to do with it. Michael stayed with her a while. Then things changed. I never asked exactly what happened. Didn't need to. Whatever was going on between them was no longer my responsibility. My responsibility was getting through the divorce without losing everything I'd spent 32 years building. After the divorce, I moved into a smaller house. First night there, the refrigerator made a strange noise. I stood in the kitchen listening to it. For a second, I thought about calling Karen. She'd always been the one I'd ask about things like that. Then I remembered, didn't call her. Found the owner's manual. It was a loose wire. Fixed it myself. Felt like a small thing. But I remember it. I kept working. Started taking weekend drives. Sometimes I'd stop at a diner. Sometimes I'd just drive till I felt like turning around. And I pulled an old pickup out of the garage I hadn't touched in years. Needed work, brakes, battery, some wiring, nothing I couldn't handle. One Saturday afternoon, I was lying underneath it when my phone buzzed. It was Karen. Can we meet for coffee? I looked at the message. For a long time, I didn't answer. There was a time when a message from her would have stopped whatever I was doing. Not anymore. I put the phone face down on the workbench. A few minutes later, my son walked into the garage. He looked at the truck. Still working on that thing. Yeah, you're never gonna finish it. I laughed. Probably not. He shook his head. Come on, Mum's asking if we're coming over Sunday. I wiped my hands on a rag. Are you going? Yeah. I nodded. Then I'll come. He smiled and walked away. I looked at the phone again. Karen's message was still there. I didn't delete it, just didn't answer it. Then I turned back to the truck. Still wasn't finished. Neither was I suppose. But for the first time in a long while, I was working on something because I wanted to, not because somebody else expected me to. For 32 years, I thought my job was keeping our life together. Turns out, I also had to learn how to build one of my own.